be promoted.
Yeah, and then looking at other, systems that are doing this. I remember when we were talking about this before, at that time, board member Zendel had some ideas of how it would actually happen, that we could do it it would be depending on zones and rather than seniority. So I can't remember all the details, but he seemed to have some ideas, but maybe that's something
Yeah,
that
we
we can
could
just
go back
explore and
check with
see.
him.
See, Chris, different ways of doing this, that it becomes a little bit more procedural. That if a person doesn't run from that zone, but then that position, it will kind of skip, and then that person would come at the end. So that
Because
way
it'd be on
they would be
seniority.
in seniority.
Mhm.
But if somebody doesn't want to be considered, then it would be skipped.
Right,
So.
right. And
So-
treasurer is not in that sequence. It should be the first three officers.
Also, yeah, it could be that, and then because right now we have treasurer board member Longston, that he should be given the opportunity to vice president
Yeah,
and president if he
Uh-huh.
want, but how that into the play. So again, going back to zones to
Mhm.
ensure that every zone has the opportunity to
Right.
be chair and vice chair.
We can one both a vice president and a secretary? Or a secretary and a vice
I think
president?
I think we separated
Treasurer.
those because
We
we
did.
did have vice president and secretary
Secretary
as
is
one.
one.
But
maybe
we
we should do that
specifically, we specifically split it out to give more opportunity for directors to serve.
Sure.
Otherwise, it's just one that's
Right,
serving as
right.
both of those positions.
Yeah. I like your ideas, Lenny. I think we just,
So
Uh-huh.
1 year term only is what
Mhm.
you're proposing.
Yes,
yeah.
And then automatic rotation,
yes.
Did you, yes, you have that.
rotation unless they.
That was what Lenny shared.
Mhm.
Yvette, did you have any comments?
No, I agree with that, with the rotation of the officers.
Great. Is there any more discussion on old business number one?
Can I ask a question?
Sure.
What is it? Just in terms of trying to prepare the language that's coming in there, because at one point you had mentioned potentially having seniority come into play on who might step into one of the roles,
Mhm.
but then also referencing the zones.
Mhm.
And I have not looked to see how they did, it, and this will be a great resource with the Indio. But I'm just wondering, if there's 1 year terms and you're talking about the zones, then that opportunity to jump into the game would only come around once every 7 years. And so we may have directors that are out of that.
Mhm. Yeah, and so if that director, I think to begin with, if there was, everybody had same equal seniority when you started, it would make sense to do it by zones. But if we're starting it like right now, when, Director Rogers has the most seniority, so it's actually a good way to do this. In that, next, the tricky part is how do you start it? Once it's in place, then it's pretty, then you go by seniority. But right now, what we could do it as an initial one is that we could do it by zone. What is the zone for Director
So Greg.
Rodriguez? So right now we could
Two.
start it. Okay, so then the next one would
He
be,
would rotate to president
yeah.
in theory.
Uh-huh. And then what is the next zone? It will be three. Who's three?
But Dan,
Dan? Okay. Which one is Kimberly? Because I think that she. kind of
he's
looking at
6
it.
and you're 7.
Okay. And I don't mind skipping till the end to start this, to somehow get
Well,
it
let's
all
have a good
straight.
discussion on it with the board.
Yeah, 'cause
So-
I think it gets a little,
So putting Kimberly in
Just
place
like
to
what-
be following Greg, if you can figure out a way to make that, I think it would be, she's secretary right now. So moving that secretary, using that position that we created to make it more transparent as to who would be the next likely vice president and would be secretary. So using maybe that system that we have right now, and then from there, looking at the seniority after Kimberly. would
Well, to
be-
me, I think it is gotta be seniority or
So,
zone.
yeah, either one of those, it has to be one or the other.
But right now, we could, so if we go with this, Greg would go to president,
Mhm,
Kimberly would go to vice president,
mhm.
and then
Dan,
Dan,
if
if
you
wants,
choose
could
the-
rotate to
Yeah, and he
secretary.
could be secretary
But how about
treasurer at the
Arthur?
same
Arthur has
time.
been on here for a while. Seniority would be that he would be
Mhm.
the,
Yeah,
the next person that would move up.
But I'm just thinking in terms of those that are currently in office.
Mhm.
And I think we probably should try to rotate those through and then move in the,
But
the zone.
Arthur is, wouldn't he be the next secretary
yeah,
for seniority?
unless.
And
we're-
unless he
unless we're
says, I don't want to
including the
do
tre-
it.
Unless we're including the treasurer in that rotation.
Okay, so again, it's either, I don't think, the treasurer has always been kind of separate. It was always
Mhm.
considered chair, president, vice president, and secretary. I don't think the treasurer was considered as the
Right.
transition
Right.
because Arthur had that for several years. So I think it should be based on seniority and giving Arthur the opportunity
Right. to be secretary.
secretary.
There we go.
And then the next seniority would be who?
Would be you.
So you're saying you're preferring seniority over zone.
I think so, but if zone is the other idea. And then after me, it would be who? And
Yvette.
Yvette again.
What
Yeah.
if we,
That if one person has already served before, then giving another member as a chance to serve.
We'll work it out.
what if we do it by zone, but start in the east? On the east side, the only one on that side that has already been secretary would be, Baraza, so she can skip, we can skip her. And then go to the following one, which would be Dan, right? He would be the next one in line.
In favor of that. I think that if you start with these, then like your idea that allowing Tiffany to move forward as being vice chair, that would take care of that. And then I would be next. I'll skip myself. I'll skip it to kind of get us into this place of being able to move
Well, I
forward.
think it comes out logically if you're in line.
So if it's 6 and then 7 and I skip myself and then going back to 1 would be who?
Great.
But hopefully he would be okay with skipping it because he's serving it now, will be the next in line. It'll be Greg, Kimberly,
Mhm.
and then I'll skip, and then who's 2?
Art.
Art, and then so that would be a good,
Oh, I'm two, so we're gonna skip that.
okay, and then so then it would be Art.
Dan-
If they,
Dan is 3.
okay, so
Mhm.
then that's,
Yeah,
I think that's a good idea, is to do it by zones. And if the board is willing to start that way with 6, 7, skip
Mhm.
7, and
Yeah.
going back to 1, and hopefully Greg will,
Mhm.
since he would be the next in line, that he would be okay with skipping it afterwards.
And once we get into that sequence,
Then it will
the
be zone.
director would only be able to essentially serve through that rotation every 7 years.
Yeah. Because it's gonna be drops, because some people may not wanna run, or some people may not wanna be
Mhm.
president.
Mhm. Yeah.
And, so, yeah, if you had 5, then it would be, a person may not even, if they only serve 1 term, they may never be president.
So we'll put the proposed language in, and then, so are we saying there's no vote or ratification from the directors on any of the positions as they rotate in? Because that was part of what was.
No,
here
I
was
think we
the-
should still do the process, but I know when I used to be with the Board of Supervisors, they had a policy like this, but they still had the nomination. Because if there was it was still a way to get out of it if you didn't want to
Let
do
the
it.
job, right.
You know, but
Mhm.
I think that if you have a very public process, that you're expecting it to be that way,
Mhm.
you still have to have the nomination of who is the next person in line,
Yeah.
and then have that
Yeah,
person
yeah.
be nominated,
Mhm.
and then.
So if somebody doesn't want that person
Then you-
to
that's-
rotate,
Then
they-
that's when
they
you have the
just decline.
opportunity to actually,
You can decline.
yeah. Well, no,
no, it
if
would be
you
the
don't want that
directors would have to
person,
vote for that person
And-
not to rotate.
and it used to happen,
Switch
that there
to
used to
city.
be some supervisors that were not one, that's, somebody else didn't want that person. But unless there was a really strong enough reason, then, that person will be nominated, even though he or she was not popular. But there would have to be a significant reason why, but it was a way to get out of it, should there be a reason why you didn't want that person to be in charge.
So my question is, to recap, will the president be, their term be an auto rotation by zone or seniority?
So right now, we're going to seniority.
Okay,
I'm sorry, no, by zone is what, Director
Yeah,
Peralezquio
we
said.
gotta choose.
I think doing it by
Instead of
zone
zone.
right now, but just to start it off, that Greg would, move into the president right now, because that's what we have in place right now. And then, we would start with 6, 7, which I totally intend to let somebody else do it. 7, and then it would be, because that would be my 3rd year, so yeah, it'll be fine. And then and then we'll go back to 1. Because it's a little tricky in the beginning, just to start it off,
Mhm.
okay?
What if we leave president and vice president rotating? And then just vote the next person per zone in on secretary, and then we'll be able to follow that, just rotating them. So we won't have to switch it up. It'll just keep on going the way the zone is.
That would be, I guess, an idea, but, what if a new person comes on board? And that zone is up to be, up.
Be president or something, yeah.
I think that person,
That's
that
what I was
we
gonna
have to
ask.
put in some wording that, that it would, that position would be skipped until the next rotation, until everybody else has had a chance to serve. So sticking to it so that, let's say that if we're doing it this time and Greg was coming up as a new director, I don't think it would be expected for him to be president until it comes around again. So that zone is skipped entirely, not just wait for a year, but skipped entirely until it goes around again.
Maybe seniority would be.
So if we talk about, getting, I'm thinking the use of the word may, that the rotation may be or would be eligible for nomination. So let's just say vice president would be the number 1 for a vote of the directors to be president. And that's subject to their vote. If not, then something else would come into play. Secretary may be the first nominated to take over by the vice president. And that way you limit the zone rotation to the secretary position, assuming that each.
There you go. Yeah.
Rather than saying, because then that wouldn't be somebody new coming in on the zone wouldn't necessarily be nominated for president. They would be in line to take the secretary role.
Yeah, that makes sense.
And then they would rotate, the secretary
Yeah,
would
rotate.
rotate to the
Yeah.
vice president.
Mhm.
The secretary is vice president to the president itself. And we're still focusing on the zone rotation, but the nomination based on zone rotation is going to be for the secretary. And that way it would fall into the process. You'd never have a new
Yeah.
director coming in as president. They would be nominated based on their zone to secretary. They would, in theory, be president in 2 years if that board approves it, because that's to tie that in with and I'll have to look at the language a little bit so we can propose it and work with Chris on that. That way it's kind of like an automatic nomination would be the rotation of officers, which gives the board the option to choose that, and then starting the secretary.
Does that
So-
make sense to you?
So a new member, a newly elected person would never ascend to president on their first.
Right.
Correct. It could be secretary if it's that zone that's coming up, could be nominated for that, subject to the board's approval, but that would be kind of an auto nomination, let's say. Yet the only question comes in is, in this rotation, if the board opts not to, what's what's the steps there? They don't want the vice president to move the
Right.
presidency. What do you do in that particular
So
fashion?
what if the vice president's going off the board that next year, and they would be, in theory, president? Then there's gotta be
Mhm.
some kind of a nomination. That's what we experienced this year,
Yeah.
because we had, you know, Yvette going out as president, and then the vice president, Carmina, did not run. So essentially, we had those two offices open, and
I think if we had done it by zone, but skipping, but I think it has to be a combination of zone and seniority.
It has to be a combination, but I like your ideas, Erin. Maybe we just get the staff to draft
Yeah.
something for us to look
Throw
at,
out
and then
some
we can,
ideas, but
then we
we
can chew on it some more.
yeah, there's no rush.
Okay,
okay, we'll put some language together
All right.
for next time.
so so that the action that we're gonna take is, direct staff to rewrite and come up with a draft language for our next, maybe do we bring it to the board or to this committee again?
To this
No,
committee.
we come back here.
Okay, great. Alrighty. Okay, appointment to committees.
Do we have to get public input on each one before, or and vote, or do we just vote to continue it
Referring to this.
for this one?
This one, I think, is just direction to,
To move forward with the modifications of the policy.
Yeah, so we don't need a vote on that.
No.
Are you okay with that, Yvette?
Yes, I'm okay with that.
So should we move on to number 2, appointment policy, EODO3, appointment to committees? So is there staff discussion on that?
Yeah, what we did, and I'm gonna start, let me see what page it is. Page 24 of the PDF is where I'm starting. The main changes that we had in this particular version is starting on,
Is it 24 of 71?
actually, it will be 20, that's where the
24,
red line version starts, but if we could go to 25, we've added language in here that says that the FNA and program committees may each include up to 3 volunteer members. Just specifying not voting members would be subject to the volunteer member guidelines. And then in those respective committees for FNA and program, we've added that same phrasing. And then the last main element of these changes starts on page 28, which is restoring most of the language for the volunteer member guidelines that we had previously. It just specifies the specifics. That just specifies what is needed for volunteer members. That they should be somebody who lives in the district. And then let's see if the volunteer agreement was added as well to complement that.
and the key here is that they're non-voting community members. That was part of the issue we had before, is that they were trying to vote, and I know on program committee, a couple of them got a little upset when they
Yeah,
weren't.
yeah, it
allowed to
became
vote.
disrupted, actually. So, any discussion on that from Yvette or?
What was the reason for bringing back the idea of non? I'm just curious. Was it something?
I think it was just for more transparency. We had public members on the board, and when we decided to remove the members, there was some language put in that we would call professionals
Subject
were
matter experts.
knowledgeable about that subject matter. So let's just get some.
I
some
like the idea of the
professional people.
program, but I'm not sure what was the purpose of, I guess it's always a good idea to have additional input on finance as well, but I definitely think it's a great idea for a program. I'm just curious about the finance. Do you see that that's a?
I mean, from the experience that I had with it before, pros and cons, I mean, I think Arthur was a good addition to that.
Okay.
A couple of the others, yeah, he was fine. However, you know, he had some hearing issues and it really played into challenges for him hearing what was going on. And that great director, from a community member, but then he had some family issues too and dropped out.
Okay.
And that's kind of really what happened with the director of the community people on the FNA committee is they progressively dropped off.
Mhm.
And I know one of the community members was a former banker, and he got really frustrated that our chair of the finance committee didn't really know or understand how to read financial statements.
Oh dear.
So he bailed at that point too, because he's like, you know, how do I be on a finance committee and try to give contributions when the chair is leading it in a way that, you know, from staff perspective, we understood that we just kind of had to roll with kind of what was communicated there, but I personally don't think it really benefited finance committee. In some ways, I think it detracts from it or distracts from it because some of them come at it with some really different.
I think having a non-member voting though will change the perspective. If we're just looking for transparency and community input, rather than giving any recommendations to the board, we're just looking for opinions on
Yeah,
how.
And
how-
maybe as long as they're coming in knowing that, I mean, yeah, because some of the feedback that I got was, well, if I'm not gonna have opportunity to have my recommendations be known or, you know, part of the vote, then why do I even want to be on the committee?
Well, how about we try it for 1 year? And if it doesn't work, we'll revisit it.
I think it
May
failed
I add
before.
anything
Oh, yeah,
about program committee when it's available?
yeah, no, absolutely.
You know, we have the community members back when we were the program committee. Found the same thing, the same frustrations that these community members are kind of like know-it-alls. And they supersede a lot of stuff that staff had already done a lot of research on and worked with the grantees. And they would get very upset with us. And back then, we didn't have the same procedure what we're doing now. We have an expanded grants team, which includes finance, includes community engagement,
Right.
includes the program department, grants manager. We didn't ever had grant consultations with the grantees. We always just brought them in and then they were grilled especially by the community members. So I think we have a really good solid procedure now and protocol working with the grantees. And I feel like if you're gonna have 3 different people coming in that can't vote, it's gonna put the grantee on the spot again, and they're gonna have to keep revisiting. Not only do they have to not prove, but to the program department and to us, to give them the money, then you're gonna have these outsiders that are gonna be, they ask. And I'm only giving like the rabbi that we had, I mean, I can't remember his name, but he came out with some strange things, and then the other ones came out with some really weird, and our grantees were like, huh, what? It just, it was disruptive, I thought, but, you know.
I could see the benefit of doing it, as my comment before, but I could see your reasoning also how it could be disruptive. What about a compromise being that you have these volunteers that do the review? And so you have the review of, I think you have like 5 people right now. I don't know how many readers you have. And so having 6, and then so this, you know, having a subject expert to give you their input, but being able to decide on how you value it. That it's a community member unidentified, you never want to identify them, but a community member, and you get it from a perspective of somebody else. And then, so you see that, but you don't, they're not in that position of being disruptive and feeling like undervalued. But it's considered with, I know when I was on the committee, I would look at, you know, key things that I would go to, And number one being is, what is the recommendation? And then I would go backtrack and see what did they see? So having one more input, community minded, that would be part of the packet that committee members need to review before they go into that meeting. I think that might be a way that you could
Right.
satisfy what Director Rogers is saying, that getting a
And
community input.
I was thinking, the kind of persona that came to some of the public hearings, our ex-CEO of the district. What was his name? Remember?
Her?
No, long before.
Sid,
Hmm?
Sid Rubenstein?
No, long before that.
The
Yeah,
tall
anyway,
guy,
Wayne Susie?
Wayne.
Wayne, yeah.
Yeah, Wayne, somebody like Wayne, or there was somebody who was the retired CFO of Desert Regional that came to one of the public hearings. I'm just thinking there's talent out there that understands healthcare.
I think
and-
our staff is pretty talented
Yeah,
too.
I-
And
I
that's,
think-
it's kind of undermining the staff and,
You
I
know,
don't think it's
the-
undermining, I think it adds to it, and again,
Okay.
you get to read it and you get to see somebody who thinks that they know, but maybe they're totally off, you are able to see somebody rating an application a 60, and then you have all the other ones rating it an 80. You know that there's a discrepancy, that person didn't get it. Okay, but you at least get to read it, and then maybe those are questions that you get to use to, stay in my mind to consider asking during the applicant. But I'm looking at it and I get to decide, does that make sense compared to all the others? And
we're
so,
talking about the scoring.
yeah, the
Well,
scoring.
So
those are few and far between.
I know, but if you're saying, again, if you're thinking, you're not, that we as board members are not valuing the expertise of 6 staff members, but those 6 staff members, they have the experience, but why not consider, like Director Rogers is saying, is looking at another subject expert, and then being able to throw that into not in the meeting room, because then they can be disruptive, but just having them review it. And you consider, are they making good points or not? And this is not undervaluing the staff, because staff also makes good points, but you're looking at somebody else's input as well.
How much more input do we need?
Yeah, I think just, sorry, I think just logistically, I think adding additional scores and the volume of grants that could be coming down the pipeline, I think it might bog down the process. You
Well,
know, 'cause-
actually, if you have 6 members that are reviewing every application, that's asking a lot, and you are slowing down. You yourselves, the 6 that have to review all of them, could possibly slow down the process. If you have less member reviewing every one of them, you're able to review more. And I know that a lot of funders are moving in this direction, because there was 2 processes that in my day job, I was asked that if I had to submit an application, I had to serve as a reviewer for all of the hundreds of other applications that were there. So this is kind of becoming more of a open process to be able to use somebody else's input as just review the application. Are they answering the question? And being able to, the people that are looking at those scores, to see whether those scores are consistent and whether there's anything that they think are of value. So I think there is something
So
there that,
I think what I'm hearing is one person that we're identifying, not multiple different people, but one
I don't
subject
know how many
matter.
you're thinking of.
Well, this was considered.
I considered 3 for each committee. My only vision is public awareness, public transparency. These people that we would ask to be part of our a volunteer team, they have, hundreds of other counterparts that is in their circle. And I'm just thinking that just sort of, because one of the areas that we have discussed in the past is the lack of recognition, lack of familiarity in the community about what the district does. The more people we involve, the more people they see the work that has been done. I remember I handed Greg a list of all of our hospital inspection committee agenda. And he looked at that and he says, I had no clue that you guys were doing that. That, you know, that you're actually inspecting the hospitals as part of your lease agreement. So I mean, it just makes it a wider audience for the
Mhm,
district to
yeah.
get our word out. And I'm just thinking it's at no cost, no hassle.
Well, when, no, I'm sorry. Wayne.
And I'm just, my thing is, let's try it for a year.
I like
Because-
the idea. I like the idea of volunteer readers. And the point that you're making and the point that you're making, I'm thinking that it actually is not having them as part of the committee because they can be disruptive if they do not feel like they're being valued. But if they provide their input and to be assessed with the expertise that we have on staff, and then giving you the opportunity to redistribute those resources so that you are able to manage, 50 applications that are coming in and being able to redistribute those resources.
Director Yvette, did you have any comment?
I mean, I agree with the process of adding the committee members and trying it for a year. I just, I guess the part is gonna be how we're gonna use their opinion, right? Because I understand the staff's point of view too of it adding more steps to their process. And how it would make it a more longer grant application or whatever, like viewing the grants. But I also think that if there's committee members, they could also let us know things that we don't know that they're probably hearing from the community or that they've experienced in the community. And it would give us kind of a overview on the stuff, because the grantees could tell us all they want, like they can tell us everything's perfect, all our, scores are this and that. But sometimes there's people that don't have that great effect with the grantees, right? Like some of them, like say for housing, right? Some of them, they don't have the same housing experience as other people that go to the same person. So maybe that way we can kind of find out what's going on, how come it's not even. If we have a community that's letting us know what they're personally feeling. So I don't,
Yeah. Like.
May I ask this? So you weren't here when we had the prior volunteer people,
I
right?
used to actually serve as a volunteer but I only attended like one meetings. I never had time to attend it. But I was on the program committee way long ago, like 20 years ago, when I was a supervisor.
Oh,
Wilson
yeah,
staff.
that was
Remember? And I
when
find, maybe I never even made it to any meeting because it is a
We
commitment.
had an actual fourth district
Mhm.
person, because then Joe Crudetto came on and then,
Yeah.
yeah.
So
But that was the K's and hierarchy kind of thing.
So my question, President Rogers, so you were here during, before we did the volunteers, and then we had the whole team of bunch of grantees that were on the committee as well, which was a problem in and of itself because there was issues with that. What benefit did you see from the volunteer community members that we had at that time? I didn't see an ultimate benefit overall because, for one reason, for me, they weren't subject matter experts. So the communication that they were giving was so distracted from what the professional work that was done internally and from what the director's
Mhm.
knowledge and expertise was. I mean, I remember the Latino guy and then the rabbi guy. I mean, they were off in left field.
Left field.
I
I
mean,
think
and
that
they
we have-
provided no value,
Right.
in my
I
opinion.
think it's important that we find people that are experts in the field so that we're not just taking anybody and everybody. And we had 5 or 6 volunteer members of the.
Well, I think we had 3 at that time, 3 or 4, maybe it was.
Oh,
Anyway,
I think we had 5 or
but
6.
prior to that, it
Yeah,
was.
and we didn't have RVA then either, so now when we work with the grantees, we work on performance measures and we work on deliverables to make sure they're tied into each other. I mean, we really work with the grantees. I mean, we have Megan's expertise and Gracie's expertise. We've got the finance department's expertise, and so it's very well-rounded, and, Alejandro knows a lot with the different connections to the community engagement, and we will help them if it's an application that needs work, we help them craft it.
I know you
So it'll work, so we do have performance measures that are tied to our strategic goals, so that we can show that we're making an impact and an outcome. On our
Having
dollars
evidence
invested.
from the program committee the other night, we had 2 full grant applications. And it was so well prepared and so well presented that there weren't even any questions by the directors.
Yeah, well, I'm just thinking.
So why
Have-
add in?
Well, that's what, to me, it makes me wonder whether there is that, because you have that expertise on, but sometimes it's necessary to ask that naive question that generates some discussion. I know that I'm not an expert, but I asked those naive questions when I was on that committee, just to make sure that I understood it, and it would lead to something else that I had a greater understanding, even on an organization that I was aware of for many years. Again, as a reader, having that ignorance or naiveness of the program, it adds an element that is different than the expertise. That's not trying to demean or diminish the expertise on staff. It adds another layer to be able to have an understanding of what the community needs from a different perspective. It's different than having them participate in the committee because they have to do all the reading. They understand there's parameters that are set because you do now use RBA. So there's a very clear, are they, so that it's not that they don't come in with a total. We as board members don't come in with the expertise that you have, but you guys put us into these parameters of what is it that you're evaluating so that we stay on those. So having 3 other pairs of eyes that do the reading, submit their comments, that give that additional input as we are considering the whole information. Is it disruptive? Is it adding additional time to accumulate that information? I don't think so. I don't think so. I think
To me, the question is, does it add value?
I think it does.
Well, I think it does
To Yvette's question, how do we use their opinion?
Right.
I think that if I was on the committee and when I look at it right now, when I was on the committee, I would look at the 3 reviewers and I would look at all of their comments, especially if there was, concerns. If that person was voting, but you guys usually were all kind of be consistent. So that was kind of, having another person that may be on board with that is one more comment. If it's somebody that is coming out of left field, then you read those comments and you either agree with them and you don't have any questions, or you disagree, or you agree with them and then it generates some questions that you do bring up at the committee, or you don't agree with them and you just kind of say, oh, that doesn't make any sense. It's already been addressed. That person didn't get it. So it's for the committee member to decide whether there is any value to it. It's not, I don't think it adds too much time to it. It probably generates a question or 2 at the committee level.
Well, then I think that would be the director's role that are on the committees, for them to bring forward these, if you don't.
But I'm
because we
a
always look at it from-
representative of the community, and having another community member, I'm considering that committee member, that reader, as a community member. So if I choose to agree with them or disagree with them, it adds to my ability to serve my community better.
I agree. So where are we?
So I think what I'm hearing is no community members on the committee.
On the program.
on the program committee, more of grant readers. One that would be working with staff and developing then their review document that would be part of the documents that the staff.
I think that they
prepares.
could be on the program committee that change their duties to those that you just outlined. And
Do we
then,
want them coming to the program committee meetings and giving a bunch of distracted?
well,
communication?
it's,
I think what I was hearing here is that they're not gonna be at the community meetings giving communication, but they would read the grant
Mhm.
and give a
give their
give a
opinion.
review of
Yeah.
it, written
Well,
review of it.
Committees are open to the public. you know,
Right.
If they choose to attend and say, you know, that they can read
But
what their
they're-
opinions are.
But they're not a member of the committee.
They're not a member of the committee.
But that would be part of their 3-minute
Right.
public comment.
Right.
They're there as a public, not as a committee
Correct.
member,
Correct.
Mhm.
if they're so inclined.
So what do we call them, volunteers? Committee member,
Call them
program
readers.
committee volunteers?
Call them readers.
Mhm. Well, volunteers and then make that part of their job description.
What would the selection process be? How do we know they're a subject matter expert?
I think you outlined it in the documentation that the board would receive nomination and application.
Again, this is this was copied from the past that is completely different now, how we work with the grantee.
My thought on this is potentially if we're looking for that feedback, what if we took a different approach and just solicited the public to participate in the public comment section where we could get others to express their opinion?
Well, we've done that and.
I guess
Yeah,
my
yeah.
thing I'm looking
we
at,
just
what if-
don't have, you know, if we appoint definite people. That
And they
we
will
know
take
that
the
we can
time
get
to
their
read it
feedback
and-
and have time to read it and give us feedback.
And when you ask, how would you select? I'm not gonna be doing this, add one more thing to my job unless I really feel like if I'm adding value to something. And whether it fits, if I'm a student, if I'm somebody that wants to understand that field more. So just think about what's realistic. Who are the people that are gonna apply for this? It's people that think that they have some expertise, and if they don't, then they're probably going to be, one of the ones that you evaluate and that you wonder, do they even understand it? Do they understand what the subject matter is? So, yeah, I think that you kind of weed out by what is it that the responsibilities are and what is the work that's generated, because it takes a lot to read
Well,
an
we've
application.
got to do a better job of that than we did last time, because we did go through an application and interview process and look who we got on as volunteer community members, and I'm sorry, it did not work.
If
very
it's
well.
disruptive, then you don't want that person. If it's somebody that is
So how do you
taking the
make
time.
sure you get
So,
that
Is something
person?
that's missing now that you feel like we need a community member to read?
Yeah,
Is it because
yeah,
there's 6 of us that are reading this that just isn't good enough?
Yeah,
It's not the
What do you-
value or
yes,
the
and then the-
expertise,
and then
it's
the
the fact that
directors are
as
sitting there?
community members, you want to have more transparent and more open process, Donna. And that's the one thing that's missing, is that once you become an employee, you become kind of unapproachable, especially the way the district is required to operate because of not being able to be out there and soliciting applications. So that becomes very perception that there's a way, like a secret way of how you can get in. So
So
having
community members gonna solve that problem?
that more transparent as much as possible, then
Oh, the community member then can go out and solicit.
that's,
Mm.
well,
That's
actually, that's a
legal.
good idea, you know?
that's legal, but
No,
that isn't the intent.
that's not the intent, yeah. Yeah, the thing being is, how can you be more transparent within the rules that we have? And I have heard, not recently, but I have heard in the past, is that there is the perception that the district is difficult to get an application, and I have tried to explain that the reason why is because of the rules that exist. That we are not able to go out there and be meeting with people and saying this is an unmet need. you know?
But as you know from the board orientation that I did, the email will go out if they do want to have a meeting. And as soon as they submit an application, I mean, the doors are open and the conversation's open, communication lines are open, and I don't know. I'm a little,
It's
Hurt,
not
I
a slight, it's not a slight, it's just a matter of being more open.
More open.
More open, how
transparent.
our job is to be more open, to get the word out there about the resources that are available, but we're kind of a little bit
Well,
restricted.
my issue is that if I'm a grant writer and if I don't know what the policies are of the healthcare district, I'm not doing a great job as a grant. As a community-based organization that solely works in the Coachella Valley, there's only a handful of foundations that provide grants. And if you don't know our process, you don't know how to go on our website and search and download all these documents, then maybe you don't deserve a grant.
that's what we
know,
recommend, they go to
and-
NPO centric and get some, capacity
Yeah,
building.
City building.
So I think it's not like it's like all these things have so many different layers that you gotta have different keys to access. We're a public entity, the information is on the website. We interact with them, we do site visits, all these different organizations that we interact. I interact with, a lot of community members, a lot of community-based organizations, just from the work that I do out in the community. So it's not like we're hiding the process. If I'm a grant writer, I should know how to go onto the website, how to start a grant application, learn other processes, and we have a wonderful track record of all these organizations that know how to do it. There might be one or two that are out there that, sure, maybe they could learn a little bit, but I think adding on additional layers just so we could have more transparency for the community, I think, there might be other ways because I remember Crispin, that was his name, that gentleman was just
Luciano.
not Luciano, que paz descanse. He did not know the processes. He did not know the system, and then he would fight, for lack of a better term, with staff because he didn't get his way.
Mhm.
So that's what I'm fearful of, that, somebody might come in and say, well, they're not hearing me and the process is not the right way, and try to change a lot of things when in their mind, on paper we might put them certain parameters, but in their mind, it's like, I'm part of the staff now. I'm a board
Yeah,
member.
yeah.
I'm doing this and
We'll make that very clear, that this is not a new staff member. This is a person that we want to reach out and show more transparency, get the word out better about what the district does in the community, just get more opportunities for people to participate. And show up for committee and board meetings, and get your 3 minutes, so. And we've
That's another
got
thing, how many of those volunteer community members ever came to a board meeting?
a lot of them,
I remember.
yeah.
Not,
Not when
not
I
the
was,
ones that were.
when Luciano was here, I don't remember him ever being at a board meeting, just the community.
And it also, just an example, now we also have an end of the grant meeting. They submit their final report. We want to know what their challenges, their barriers are, what are 5 things you would do differently. We'll work with them. Voices for Children, we had a really good meeting with them yesterday. And we closed the meeting going, remember, we have a rolling grant process. And they were like, we get it, yep, we get it. So I mean,
That's
they
great.
know we have a rolling grant process. They know they can continue to keep writing grants and looking for funding. How many, which we really might even call renewals, because it's a lot of the same organizations are coming back for funding the same programs that we have found to be just making such an impact in the community that we want to keep funding them.
Well, I think some of the frustration with some of the grantees is that they're unable to apply because our strategic goals are restricted to certain goals,
High priorities.
and they can't apply because they don't fit into that. And that's just the way it is,
Yeah.
unfortunately, but,
But we've bent the rules in the past.
Yeah, there's a huge need for it, but I
I
think we should stay focused.
I just think that what we're trying to accomplish by hoping that more people will take an interest in what we're doing before, the public comment, that we're not gonna get people there. It's not realistic. If they are there, it's probably, some of the people that come in the past that come to complain about something specifically. Okay, but the kind of input that Director Rogers is asking for as a committee member, hearing what you're saying, that I have seen in practice when we've done this before, I think that they can be addressed, and then we will determine in a year whether there is any value to having this community input. And it's not a slight against staff. Donna, I'm sorry that you think that you feel like it's just as a community member, put yourself outside of that role, in that we have a responsibility to do everything that we have in our power to make it more open to the public. And if this doesn't work, then we get to tell the public, hey, we tried this and it didn't work. There was no interest, or they dropped out because they didn't feel like they were being valued.
Well, I
But
think
this
we,
is the parameter that they're able to operate in.
I
So
think
that's
we
why-
experienced that.
Experienced
We've
that
already
with
gone
But-
through that.
It's not,
Well,
we're not changing the.
We're not the only, we have other healthcare districts in California that have advisory committees. And I did research that at one time about the numbers and what was in their bylaws. So, we've been at this at 1 hour, we've got 10 policies to look at. So can we put this to, send it back to staff to, refine the language and come back at the next committee meeting?
With the direction being.
The
Madam Chair,
direction being that, that we add three,
up to,
volunteers for the program committee, not to be members of the committee, but to be, supporters, readers. I would call them volunteers, but, but write their job description as if they would be supportive of, staff and, with the goal of furthering our community input, transparency, etc. Does that sound good to you, Director Letty?
I agree with your.
And-
position.
Director Yvette?
That's fine, but I think that when we select our community members, we should be careful with the ones that have ties to the organizations that we fund to. We don't want to have no problems with.
Definitely,
No conflict.
yeah, no conflict of interest.
And hope-
Name, I don't think it's beneficial on FNA, to be honest with you.
Well, why don't we try with one member rather than three? And see if one person has any value. I'm thinking of, the CFO of Desert Regional would have some input in terms of.
But we're not soliciting them, right? We're putting out something, they're asking the community
Right,
members if
right,
they have an
yeah,
interest.
Yeah, and the only, I'm looking at 2027 and 100 million, and then, what is it, 60-something million a year thereafter.
One,
Yeah, that, that we need some big ideas in terms of
but,
how we can.
but
serve
isn't
our
that gonna be
community.
driven by our
Our
strategic
strategic
plan
plan
and our
consulting.
directors? I
Yeah.
don't think that comes
I'm
from
just-
outside
Yeah,
people.
I'm just saying that, let's get a different perspective.
Community.
With this one, I do disagree. I think that with finance, you have
The community member.
staff that have to have that expertise. There are CPAs that have to have it. And their members don't lie. There's no interpretation. It's like with the program, there's interpretation. There's like, oh, I don't agree with that. Oh, well, that I've heard bad things about that organization. Things like that. There's more subjective possibility. and you want to hear it and you want to know whether you want to discount it or not. But with the finance, I think that, you, as a board member, I trust the numbers. I just get to ask, what about that? And what about that? You know, but I don't think that there's a value to
Right.
have an outside
Well,
member.
The purpose is to get, at least in my mind, to get 3 people from the community to attend the meetings. You know, you get more community input, other than whether, you know, that's valuable. Is it valuable for the community to know what goes on financially with the district? I think it is.
And I
You
think
know,
it's a conflict to have someone from the hospital
Mhm.
on the finance.
Oh, no, we
I
don't
think
want
it's a
anybody
public-
from the
No,
hospital.
but you mentioned the CFO.
I'm saying the retired
There's no written
CFO.
documents on anything, finance or grants or applications, I mean.
I know, well, that's the problem, is that the perception is that we operate in secret. If we.
I know.
Perception
It-
coming
it-
from, I
it's
haven't
the-
had
it
it.
is.
Do they,
I
They're
think,
not gonna tell you guys, they tell us. We're out there and we're
now we're
hearing
hearing
it.
But
well,
now
tell
we-
them to come to our finance committee.
Well, we
meetings
tell them,
of-
We tell
it's not
them.
a secret.
Well, they're not-
Everything is.
I think-
public.
We can do
But
like
if-
the We Get
but if-
Will
but if-
involved in
but
it
if
and
we
put out
have-
some kind of
Absolutely,
contact
he
or
needs to
some
do more,
kind
I
of
There's no
marketing.
reason to be taking it as a negative. It's an opportunity.
I'm not taking it as a negative, Lenny. It's just that, you know, we're hearing things now that we had no idea that the so-called perception was out there. They're telling the directors. I would think the directors would be their job to come back and tell staff.
I think this is what the director is asking for this reason, is to put it in here, is because she has been hearing it. And I know I heard it, but it hasn't been that big of a deal because I've always responded to it and they were okay with it. But I have heard it in the past, so it's not like totally, like, I can't believe that that's happening, because I have heard
And
it.
you say in the past. How
So-
long are we talking about?
So if what you're saying right now is true, how did then the 3 or 4 years that we had the community members on there? Obviously, we didn't gain any benefit from the public knowing any more about the district and the processes with those people. So how is this time going to be any different?
I'm just saying that the people that we would invite to participate would be community leaders that would have their own circle of other professionals that would communicate the, you know, the goings of the district, you know, we spent, how much money on this grant and we're doing really great in the community and, you know, I'm just looking at public perception.
I would think if we had that kind of interest out there in the community,
Mhm.
that we would have more people that would be running for the board. And we just have very limited people that even apply to a.
Well,
running
the
for the
number
board.
is, it's got more people that might run for the board.
Okay, so in line with what Director Rogers or President Rogers said before about how much time do we want to allocate to it, is there support for having a community representative on the finance committee? I am not in favor of it, but if there's a majority, then it could be 2 against 1, but I'm not in favor of for the finance.
So in terms of not having an appointed community member attend the meeting.
No, for period. I don't think that there's a purpose that is served by. It's enough of I don't think it's necessary to have it. I think that members don't add, there's no interpretation to the numbers. I think the numbers are what they are. And having a community member outside is not gonna come in and add more value to that as a naive or ignorant, because that's the way I think, is that if I'm reading an application and I have no idea about this organization, I'm still gonna have my ideas on it. But numbers, financials, and it has to be, no, I don't think that they would add more value to it than what we have
Okay.
as a process already.
So we're 1-to-1, so we can move on.
Right.
Yvette, what are your thoughts?
I mean, if we're not gonna do it unilateral, like with all the committees, I don't know what the point is. I mean, I understand the whole thing about the community so that we have community representation and stuff. And that certain community members think that we're not, listening to them or whatever, but everybody has the same option, the packets are put on the website, everything is told. I mean, I don't know what more we need to do in order to make ourselves known in the community.
So are you in favor of Director Rogers to put it in there? Are you in favor, just to move it along and to get the vote? Or are you in favor of my position of not adding it to finance? Either one, just make a decision that way we could move on.
And she's also saying about if you can do it for one.
You can do
One
it
for all the committees,
for
that's
all
what
the
she said,
committees.
not why just
Okay,
one.
so you're saying then revisit the program committee then? Okay, so if you want to revisit the program committee, I'm in favor of program.
I'm in favor of program.
And you're saying you're not in favor of program, Yvette?
No,
Okay, so it's 2-1. Okay, and then for finance, I'm sorry, go ahead, Director Rogers.
It's okay, big sister Letty. So, finance, are you in favor of adding community members to the finance committee? Is that directory?
yes,
Okay, so that's 2-1. All right. So we'll instruct staff to come back with and write a policy statement and a job description.
Okay, and then we'll
Might
bring
be the
back.
wrong
at
meeting,
a future-
maybe next door.
Conference 101.
Yes, it's next door out to your right.
Got it, thank you.
Okay.
You're welcome.
So are we done with business number 2? Can we move on to number 3?
Yes.
Rules of order for board committee and committee meetings. Are there any changes in that one that I noticed?
Very minor change, where it says the president, I just added the board president, so that didn't change the meaning, it's just clarification.
Oh, great. So do we need to vote on that? for
Yes,
that
please.
Minor change?
I'll move approval.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed?
I,
Thank you, Yvette. All right, board meeting conduct. Number 4. We added a,
This was just a discussion, right? It wasn't, I haven't added any.
Yeah, and
Specific
then
language
we
change.
included the article that you.
right,
provided.
the article that I included. Is that something that we could just attach?
I don't think we can attach it because this goes into more about the directors, I think, if I'm remember right. Where the actual policy talks more about the conduct of the public, I believe.
I see, I like the wording in the article that talks about. There's nothing in there about, about disruptive behavior. And I think that, I've heard at, other ACHD meetings, CSD meetings, that more and more, board meetings are facing disruptive behavior. And I think that it's something that we should mention as part of our 3-minute discussion for, public comment.
Are you talking about disruption from the public
Yes.
or
Yes.
the directors? I
Disruptive.
think the policy,
Does that say that?
addresses fairly well with it.
Okay, well, I remember reading it, so the policy said that. And so is there something that we can just add the wording during the 3-minute public comment?
And Jeff actually described the new assembly bill concerning public disruption and removal
Mhm.
of a member of the public
Right,
as well.
right.
But I guess the question is, who removes the member from the public in the meeting?
The big marine that we have on.
So item 3.4 says no disruptive and or boisterous conduct shall be permitted at any board meeting. Persistence in this kind of conduct shall be grounds for summary termination by the board president, chair of that person's privilege of address. So it's the board president then that would conduct that.
Right.
If unacceptable conduct persists, the board president / chair may request removal of the person from the meeting and or clear the room, allowing only accredited members of the press for the duration of the meeting. Only matters appearing on the agenda may be considered. The board president may allow for those members of the public not to be responsible for the disruptive conduct back into the room if decided.
I think we can shorten that and include it in there. I'll help you work on it.
Okay,
Just something shorter, but just something that lets people know that the board meetings can't be disruptive, and I think
well,
one
what's
of
the
the,
process in removing them? If
Well,
it's short,
one-
it takes that.
I think Letty attended the same, breakout session with me with the attorney and said that what you do is you just clear the room.
And that's
and then-
part of what's.
And you take a 5-minute break and then come back.
Or maybe add a short blurb about SB 1100.
Oh, that's a
Yeah.
good idea.
Yeah, let's put that, something, we'll
Like a
work to
sentence.
get that in.
A sentence to say that disruptive behavior will be adhered to per
Mhm.
AB's letter.
Right. We'll rewrite that and get it back to you.
Mhm.
Okay, so no action. Any comments from you, Director Yvette?
No, I don't have any comments.
Okay, so we're on ticket distribution policy.
All right.
And
Did Letty get the handout and Chris as well, one of each that President Rogers provided, concerning, what Grossmont's policy as well as other,
I'll be right back.
other special districts, who don't have a limit in their policy either.
So is this saying that it's different than what we do?
It is, there's a policy that does not have a limit for Grossmont.
I think that's where President Rogers is going, is that she just doesn't want the personal unit. I don't think she has a problem with the rest of it, my understanding.
She doesn't, it's always the limit, the 2,500 limit.
The policy in here is the existing policy. There's no change to it.
I went to all of these websites and checked their policy on ticket policy. And, none of them had a ticket policy per se, although it was interesting reading what's going on in the other healthcare districts. The only only, district or only, yeah, healthcare district that had a policy, which what you have here is you could see, Grossmont. And I asked, I checked in with the FPPC to see if, there was such a restriction on, 1,200 a year, or I'm sorry, 2,500 a year, for a ticket policy for board members, and, they asked that our attorney write the letter to request an opinion. And when I checked with Jeff, he didn't have any feedback. He said he didn't, he had no objections to it being, illegal or legal, whatever. He was saying, he gave the opinion that the $2,500 a year restriction was not in code or in the law anywhere. What have you heard?
Yeah, that's my understanding from Jeff, is that $2,500 is not a legal requirement anywhere. That can be defined by the board, but whatever's in the policy is what you follow,
Correct.
is what he was saying. So the limit can be defined by the board, but then you should, so if there's no limit at all, that can be decided by the board. Or if there's a limit, you follow whatever. that
Right.
policy.
I'm just saying that we follow the budget, that we have a budget of, is it 12,000?
20,000.
20,000 a year. And that, because there are some board members that don't go to events. And some that do. And if we just strike the $2,500 per year limit from the policy, it will open it up for the board members that attend, events, the district events in the valley. What do you think, Director Letty?
Well, I think we do need to have a policy with a dollar amount. Because I think for transparency and for us to be able to point out to our constituency, we have a policy and I'm adhering to it. So not having something in there, I think would appear like if we don't have, and considering that we've been talking last year and this year about having, once we have awareness of a situation, that we should address it. So addressing it by putting a dollar amount on there, and whether that is 2,500 or whether it's a little bit higher, I think we're addressing it. We're not just ignoring it or making a decision not to put a dollar amount. 2,500, I don't know, Andrea, when I checked on it a couple of months ago and you told me how much I had, because I thought I actually had a higher amount. And I was shocked that I had a whole bunch of, because I go to a lot of events. And you told me a lot of those are through sponsorship tables by the district, so they don't really apply.
Including business events.
So, so it hasn't been a problem for me, and I attend a lot of events, some of them free, some of them paid. So I don't think it's ever been it's not a problem, so I'm okay with the 2,500.
So I understand that that's in the law that the district is supposed to record the recipients of the tickets on the website.
That is correct. And I'm just a little bit behind, but that is correct. Yes, it's Form 802.
So it is a public document, public is aware of it. So I'm requesting that we strike the limit altogether, and that we are the only district in California that has a limit in terms of financial ticket policy for board members. And I just think that it restricts our attendance and restricts our ability to be communicated with the public. What is your take on it, Director Yvette?
I think the 2,500, I don't think I had a problem with that 2,500. I think that's okay. That's a okay amount. I mean, I don't really feel comfortable with adding more to that. We're spending taxpayers' dollars, so we already have our other conferences that we go to and money comes out of there. So I think that that's a adequate amount, the 2,500.
Would you be open to changing it to 5,000?
Mm. I don't know. I mean, like I tell you, I feel like it would be too much money.
Well, I mean, the event in May, sorry,
The Chase. The Chase?
sorry.
The Chase? Chase board,
Yeah, the Chase is $475,
$500.
$500.
And some of the other ones are
Yeah,
$350 to get.
Right,
To
and
your
so
point.
that's for two people, that's $1,000 right there.
Well, I think what it is, I mean, to me, it's just like the meal limits that we put on. I mean, you have to live within whatever is defined. I mean, that's why we set the meal limits, is because there were some that were going far and above.
Mhm.
And for public agency with public dollars, there should be some definition to live within, so that it's not perceived to the public that it's just an open checkbook that everybody can go to everything that they want.
So Letty, what do you think about increasing it to 5,000?
I know that there is a cost of living. A lot of these tickets that we used to buy, a year ago, were like $100 and now they're $140. There is that, consideration. But I'm hearing what Director Perez-Gil is saying about doubling it up, the perception that that would have to the public, that, is it really, is that really the next step to take? So I would be inclined to increase it, but to 3,000, to be a little bit more reasonable of the cost of living of the things, but, at that point,
So an increase of $500.
yeah, and this will allow us to take it forward to the board, and the full board can then decide if it's 3,000 or 5,000
Or not at all?
or not at all. Because
Let's-
that would
let's do
allow us
that.
to move it forward instead of thinking about it more here.
Let's do that.
Does Director Fresco have a?
Are you good with that, Director?
I'm
Figueroa?
okay with that. Yeah, with raising it just the 500.
And then taking it to the full board for discussion,
Yes.
okay? We don't need a vote. Do we need a vote?
No, it's a consensus.
Okay.
But wouldn't it be a vote to
Move forward.
move it forward? for
Yeah,
board
yeah,
Consideration?
But
Yeah.
there's not an action item on the agenda, is it? Or am I
yeah,
mistaken?
it is an action.
Oh,
item.
thank you, my
Uh-huh,
mistake.
yeah. So let's, I'll make a motion to, change it to a $3,000 limit per year, and then to move it forward to the vote for possible discussion and or changes.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Okay, number 6, authorized check signers.
Yes. On this one, if we could go to page 52, please. This was brought to the Finance and Administration Committee to discuss, and they approved the changes. The main changes on this was just specifying the process for allowing some more ACH transfers, electronic transfers in lieu of a check. And then defining those specific roles, so that way our procedures were captured in the policy for both checks and transfers that may be needed for operating the district.
Any questions, any discussion?
Does the ACH cover, if rather than giving the grantee a check, that they could have a direct deposit into their account?
Not in this version. In this one, we increased what was allowable for like health, dental, vision insurance premiums, retirement expenses, utility, credit card payments, as well as on an as-needed basis to avoid any late fees or whatnot. I do plan on seeing what else I can discuss with Chris on some of those elements, but I wanted to get a little more feedback on what other organizations have done to ensure that the steps that we're taking will meet our auditors' requirements for any of those. But it definitely is something that I'm looking into and we'll discuss with Chris.
We're moving towards seeing if we can do most everything electronic.
Those are the things. that-
Oh,
for the
okay,
ACs.
sorry. No, it's okay.
Mhm.
So we will be to that point.
Yeah, I was thinking making some things easier for grantees too.
Yes, and we just want to add a little bit to get
Yeah.
it going on some of their other elements before.
Okay. Any more discussion? Director Lady?
I move approval.
I second.
All in
Move
favor, say
recommendation.
aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. Okay, financial reserves. Number 7.
And those reserves, on page 57. What the intent of these adjustments were to the policy was to rephrase. Previously, this was focused on talking about the reserve funding to operate the hospital should the lease be terminated based on the recent signing of the new lease. The language was changed here to just define it as our reserve funding, and that the use of that could be for operational purposes as needed, and at the discretion of the board were to take action on it, and then defines the process on how we're documenting those transfers in order to ensure the appropriate approvals. The other element to make note in this, because we do make transfers throughout the year, it's limited between the operating accounts and the investment account itself. We can't opt to go to a different account number. Our limitations with the bank right now is exclusive to those two-way transfers. And so when we have funds that we don't need access to right at the moment, we may transfer funds into the investment account to let it try to grow. And then if we need those funds later on in the year, as we are making our normal operational purchases or paying grants, we'll transfer those in and out. But the element there is if the board opted to, since we have to wait until 2027 for the first round, the board could authorize the use of those funds for something.
That they could be used now, for, I mean, if we, when we pass it, those reserve funds could be used for grants
It could be used by formal action of the board, so
by formal action of the board. Okay.
pretty wide open in terms of,
Mhm.
Yeah, so right now we have, like in our budget, we have the 5 million for the grant. But if there's something beyond that, that the board chooses to use those resources for, then
Mhm.
that would come from
Yeah.
board direction.
Right.
I remember the past with the CB link. Well, how are we gonna pay for this?
Mhm.
We're gonna take it out of this.
Reserve.
Reserve.
Right, that's what we did. Okay, so, any discussion? Director Levy?
No, I don't find it like it's.
Director Yvette, any discussion?
No.
I'll make a motion to approve. Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Okay, number 8.
This was just a review of the policy as part of our 2-year rotation.
And no change.
No
May I
change.
have a motion to approve?
Is, are we on number 8?
Mhm.
Okay,
No, and no change.
okay. I'll move approval.
I'll second.
All in favor, say aye.
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 Motion carried. Number 9, purpose of board policies.
Yes, so this starts on page 6. What was added to this policy was just a minor clarification in bullet point 9 that just references that when policies fall under the authority of the FMA or program committee, that they will be reviewed by the respective committee in addition to the board and staff communications. And so, as an example, for the 3 policies we have on here today that were related to FMA, those were brought to FMA, reviewed, and then approved, and recommendations will be relayed.
Great. And so which three are you saying would go to the FNA?
Oh, wait, just the FINO2 had already gone to FNA. I was just referencing
I
that.
see,
It's our practice. This just documents that into policy.
I see.
That will make sure that it's brought to those committees, get their feedback prior to bringing it here. That way, we have that additional feedback.
So if this covered rising the policy of adding 3 community members to the program committee, does it go forward to the program committee?
Oh, good point.
Mhm.
Well, we would need to do that when we bring that, policy back. And it was just for discussion really at this point, so yeah, so it should be considered by those
It should.
committees. I agree.
Mhm.
Great. Any more discussion? Any discussion,
I will
Director?
move approval.
No.
To apply, that the other item go to the committee that it has, whatever
Jurisdiction.
that point name says, name point,
Policy for-
Right.
authority,
Mhm.
yeah, I'll move approval.
I'll second. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
And number 10, new policy, sponsorship.
Yes. We have this new policy, which was reviewed at the finance committee. Well, there was a small recommendation to make an adjustment. Let's see what it was.
Item 3.3.
There we go. So the recommendation was to include a budget from the sponsorship request along with the elements that are detailed here. So that would be our adjustment, since it was just, the meeting was just held last night, we had already published the packet, so.
Oh, okay.
that
Okay.
would-
A budget for the event.
Yeah, so
Yeah.
they would not only need to include the dollar amount, the sponsor levels available, how the sponsorship will either provide benefit or will provide benefit to the community by detailing how the funding will be used, or how it will provide general support for the organization's purpose, along with the
Okay.
budget.
Is this where you would, didn't FNA also mention something about you would fund for-profits, but nonprofits, so you would require an IRS determination letter?
We
Have to
talked
fund
about
that?
that.
We didn't talk
We talked about that in staff.
Oh, it's staff, sorry.
Yeah, and the reason for the budget is that would help, staff and board members, determine what is the dollar amount that should be considered, because as you remember, Director Rogers, there was discussion about why are we giving this amount to this organization in a similar event? Why are we giving a higher amount? That it depends on their budget and what they need for that event. It might be that it's a smaller event, that it's a smaller budget that, and therefore they're asking for $1,000, whereas another organization has a budget that they can, be able to make a case that they are asking for $10,000. And so the CEO would then, use that as his or staff would make the recommendation based on that input.
They're like how we look at grantee budgets, program budgets too,
Yeah.
like if they're asking us for the full percentage of the funding requests, and they don't show anybody else asking anybody else for funding. you know.
Mhm.
And this is their proposed budget, correct, for the event?
Mhm.
And will it also include, proposed or tentative numbers of participants and things like that?
That's great thought. And summarizing possibly the number of attendees after the event, including the ticket sales.
Provide benefit to the community. Yeah, that's a good idea. I attended an event, that, I was very disappointed in that there was only less than 5 people there in North Palm Springs.
Wow.
It was disappointing. It's not that they didn't try, it's just that they just, didn't
Mhm.
somehow get people there.
Yeah, because conflicting dates and you don't realize it.
It's a new event, so when you try to do something new, that's when you ask for a smaller amount because you don't know, how. Yeah.
Any more comments?
No.
Director, do you have any comments, Director Yvette?
No.
I'll move approval that besides the budget to also include wording, as Director Rogers said, about asking how many people they anticipate seeing there.
Well, we were talking about that it only, well, of course, it has to be a nonprofit organization because that's all we can legally donate to.
The eligibility.
Yeah. Okay, I'll second it. All in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Motion carried. New business. Aguilar Curry Healthcare District, AB 2019. Is this new? This is old legislation, correct? Yeah.
Yeah, but it's new business to discuss. We have policy that we follow based on the AB 2019. I don't know how we can deviate from it.
I think there's something there that says there shall be yearly. I see it.
In the actual bill,
Yeah, and the actual bill. That there was something in the bill that said there should be reporting of, here it is. Um, Including duties relating to the website must list current board members and recipients of grant funding. I think we do that. And adopt annual policies for providing assistance or grant funding as specified.
We do that in our grant policy,
Okay.
when we have our annual budget, that is done as well.
Mhm.
What is it that we're not doing? Instead of going by the things that we're doing,
No, I think we're
we're okay.
complying with everything. I think the reason that this is here is that there was, I think Director Logston had, asked the question, is there anything that we can do to address the issue where we cannot solicit the public? And I just don't think we can do anything with that unless there's change to legislation.
So first of all, understanding the legislation is this step. And then talking about whether we want to get into approaching the legislator and what exactly would want to change. And then deciding if the board has support to actually approach the legislature. So first
So
understand.
it's something to go to our lobbyists for, to ask if that's a little short term to get anything on the legislature agenda now because of the deadline.
Yeah, I don't think it's happening now.
Yeah, and do you have to wait a whole 2 years to introduce new legislation?
It usually takes 2 years to get it through. It doesn't take 2 years to introduce it. It usually takes at least the second year to get it through.
So I think new ones could be introduced next year,
I see.
but it's typically a 2-year
So we'll
process.
put that on our to-do list to look at changing the legislation in terms of,
And probably keeping in mind that I'm sure there was a whole lot of feedback as this bill was in process that probably had some of the same concerns that have been expressed.
I
Right.
think that if we could document the adverse effects that it's making in terms of being able to provide grants to the community and getting the word out and that there's ways to do it, but while still keeping conflict of interest laws in mind.
Or maybe if we just agendize it to have the board review this and then to specify, to decide on whether there's interest on having CEO meet with our lobbyists to share those concerns and then to get that feedback from the lobbyists on what would be the process and and for him or her to tell us how we should, recommend how we should approach it.
But about a year ago, actually, maybe it was less than a year ago, I actually wrote in my to-do list things that somebody had mentioned at board meeting about inviting, I think we're going through strategic planning, inviting the author of AB 2019 to come to the district and talk to the board and say, what was the purpose behind this and why, here's we're stymied, the perceptions out there that we can't give grants, that we're too hard to, we may be interpreting the bill the wrong way. And the author may say, well, no, yes, it does say you can't solicit, but,
let's define solicit.
yeah, I mean, so maybe, what was the intent of the author when they wrote this?
So maybe the author wouldn't be interested in coming, but usually if the invite would be great if if he or she actually said yes, but the lobbyists, usually, there's a lot of documentation that goes in there as to what the intent was and what are the possible implications of it, and did they consider these things? So having our lobbyists that's in the business of this to be able to meet with CEO or however a committee, if it went, or the full board, whoever, but to then have him or her start studying it and what are the options that we have. But he or she could give us more information about what was the intent of the legislation.
I remember us bringing up that at another time some years ago.
Or I'll talk to the lobbyists and see
They'll
what,
give you a lot of background information for you.
Okay, that was for discussion. I think we've got a good list of future topics and issues. I know that
One topic that we didn't touch on, that came up again at our finance legal meeting was about the donations. If you could come back with, remember we talked about the definition of what will be a donation and whatever,
yeah, we would update that in the CEO
yeah.
discretionary
Right.
policy.
So that was my.
Yeah. I know that it may be premature for me to offer this as an idea for future discussion, but as our district grows in terms of our capabilities in the future, I would like to see a volunteer auxiliary for the foundation to help with staff, with events, with things that volunteers do for an organization. So that's something in the future I'd love to see established.
Well, I think there'll probably end up being several things defined through our strategic planning process, and so that's a topic certainly to discuss there too. Yeah.
Great. Any more ideas? Director, did you have any ideas that you wanted to add to future agenda items?
No.
Okay, if you have any, please forward them on to me and I'll see that they get on the agenda.
And
But
I
did we
think,
have,
go ahead, I'm sorry.
did we have, you said that Alejandro might give us an idea about you said we may have a person at a board meeting to discuss.
Yeah, so
Immigrant.
TODEC will give a
TODEC.
presentation at the February board meeting
Okay. Well,
of what they're experiencing with the
okay.
immigration issue.
Is that what you're looking for?
I was
Director Wendy?
hoping that, that we would be able to come to some understanding as to whether it would be, necessary and helpful to have a statement that we could communicate to the public on our website that that our interest is healthcare. Healthcare only. And business has
Regardless.
always been, our mission is this,
Mhm.
and, that, just bringing to attention that even today, even more so, that our interest is healthcare and not anything beyond that.
Well, and
Because
to
we're by
make the
public health.
statement that, that, regardless of immigration
Immigration
status
status,
or
yeah.
citizenship status. Something.
So I would like a statement like that, to be, maybe you could draft something that we could look at so that we could actually, agree on something instead of abstract. And then, if there's some changes that somebody would want to make to that, but then we could agree to it and then put it on our, website, sooner rather than later.
Yeah, we can work with Will to all the same thing.
Okay, anything else? Anything else, Director Rivera?
No,
You had made, in the email response, you had made, or one of the items was with regard to, I think, how we review the policies. And so they're on a 2-year cycle. I don't know if that's what you were meaning by that, or what, I have to go to your email too.
It's fine, yeah,
Yeah.
I'm good.
Because we have them set up on a 2-year rotation. And we like to stay with those 2-year rotations instead of continuing to bring back policy.
Right, yeah, well,
all the time.
sometimes there's policies that need to be reevaluated, I get that, but yes, the 2-year cycle. Anything else? Is it time for adjournment?
I think so.
Okay, I adjourn the meeting, thank you.
Thank you.
thank
for-
you.
Thank you
Time
for
for cocktails.
Good night.